Good evening, friends, and welcome to Sleepy Time Tales, a podcast aimed at helping you to get a good night's sleep. Do you find your mind plagued with the stresses of modern life, especially when the lights are out and you're trying to get a restful night? Does your spinning mind keep you awake? Follow my voice down the path towards a good night's rest. Listen to me tell a story that will keep your mind from wandering to your daytime problems, the ones you can't solve right now and will be easier to solve well rested. Listen to my voice and allow yourself to drift, following the twists and turns of the story, but slowly letting go and drifting into sleep. Before we get on with the show, I'd like to take a couple of minutes and ask you for a little bit of support. This show is completely listener supported, principally by supporters on Patreon, but also from people who throw a little something in the tip jar and who spread the word. I know that the show is valuable to a lot of people, and those who help to fund it because they have the urge and they have the means, are very much appreciated. So if you're making use of Sleepy Time Tales regularly to help you to deal with sleeplessness, and you have the urge to support the show, and of course, if you have the means, please check out patreon.com/sleepytimetales or go to the link in the show notes or from the website to take a look at what's on offer there. Or if you're more inclined to make a once-off contribution, then take a look at the new service Buy Me a Coffee. You can find my link at buymeacoffee.com/sleepytimetales, also linked in the show notes. And there you can make small once-off contributions without even needing to sign up for their service. This week, Michaela bought me a few coffees, which after a rough week will be very much appreciated. Thank you very much to you, Michaela, for your generosity. But while money is handy, of course, because of course that's how you buy things, another huge way to help the show is simply to spread the word. If there is someone in your life you think will benefit from listening to Sleepy Time Tales, please just let them know. If you recommend the show on social media, make sure to tag me in so that I can see and I can thank you. That's at Sleepy Time Tales on Instagram or Twitter. Last but not least, of course, I need to shout out the music, which is Sweet Night and Friends by Kumiko. Their music is available on their website at loyaltyfreakmusic.com. I've linked their website in the show notes as they've got some very cool stuff that they release under various names that I recommend taking a look at. Thank you very much, and let's get back to the show. So what exactly is Sleepy Time Tales? What is it for? It's a bit of a strange idea after all, a podcast that you're supposed to fall asleep to. But lack of sleep is a health crisis in the 21st century, and this is a podcast that is intended to help those that it can to get a restful night. Do you find yourself lying awake at night, with your mind spinning in emotions in turmoil with anxieties of 21st century life? Do you wake up in the middle of the night and find yourself not quite able to doze back off at 3 a.m? I'm here to help. My name is Dave, and I'm your narrator, here to help you into a restful night. Sleepy Time Tales is intended to be used as a distraction to what keeps you awake at night, or sometimes simply background noise, or maybe even some company. That's why I make these episodes quite long, so that I'm here for you without putting you under any pressure, because the end is coming. There are a couple of different ways to engage with the show. For me, I need something to focus on, a story or an event that lets me keep my mind on a specific point, to stop it from spinning out into stress and anxieties. To focus just enough not to resist the embrace of a night's sleep when it comes for me. Some people may need something a little bit different, just something in the background. Some kind of white noise, whether it's the sound of the rain or wind in the trees or the ocean, or just some boring dude droning on. But however you're listening to the show, it is very important that you don't try to force sleep. Just keep a light mental grip on the thread of the story and allow the need for sleep to come for you. Now obviously I'm hoping that you're asleep before I get to the end of the episode, but it is very important you don't feel pressurized. If this is your first night, it probably won't work for you. I recommend giving it a solid 2, preferably 3 nights to try and get used to the idea of listening to my voice, to get used to my accent, or just to get over the strangeness of the whole idea of this in the first place. Or maybe one episode isn't long enough because maybe your problem isn't so much going to sleep. Maybe your problem is waking up in the middle of the night. What I recommend, because of what it works for me, is to let the podcast run all night. Put together a playlist and I'll download all the episodes, put together a playlist and start with the latest and let them run through. I do that with the shows I listen to, and if I wake up at 3 a.m., find myself staring at the ceiling, I just pop my earbuds back in and fall back asleep again. I even sometimes do it if I wake up before my alarm. Sometimes as little as 30 minutes before my alarm, and then I still do the same. I pop my earbuds back in and waft back to sleep again. And I've got to tell you, and I've had people thank me for suggesting this, that really is the best part of the night sometimes. There's something about just allowing yourself deep relaxation before the alarm that is satisfying on a whole new level. But it's very important that you try to relax into this. If you're new to the show and prone to late nights lying staring at the ceiling, this may seem strange to you. So just give it a chance. Because I'm here to work with you, to create a safe space, a cocoon in which you can curl up and allow nature to take its course. So if you're still with me, thank you for staying. If you're already asleep, we'll chat again soon. And of course, you aren't hearing me, except maybe in a dream. Ulysses by James Joyce. One. Stately, plump Buck Milligan came from the stairhead, bearing a bowl of lather on which a mirror and a razor lay crossed. A yellow dressing gown, ungirdled, was sustained gently behind him on the mild morning air. He held the bowl aloft and intoned, "Introibo ad altare Dei." Halted, he peered down the dark winding stairs and called out coarsely, "Come up, Kinch. Come up, you fearful Jesuit." Solemnly he came forward and mounted the round gun rest. He faced about and blessed gravely thrice the tower, the surrounding land, and the awaking mountains. Then, catching sight of Stephen Dedalus, he bent toward him and made rapid crosses in the air, gurgling in his throat and shaking his head. Stephen Dedalus, displeased and sleepy, leaned his arms on the top of the staircase and looked coldly at the shaking, gurgling face that blessed him, equine in its length, and at the light, untonsured hair, grained and hued like pale oak. Buck Milligan peeped an instant under the mirror, and then covered the bowl smartly. "Back to the barracks," he said sternly. He added in a preacher's tone, "For this, O dearly beloved, is the genuine Christine, body and soul and blood and owns. Slow music, please. Shut your eyes, gents. One moment. A little trouble about these white corpuscles, silence all." He peered sideways up and gave a long, low whistle of call, then paused a while in rapt attention, his even white teeth glistening here and there with gold points. Chrysostomos. Two strong, shrill whistles answered through the calm. "Thanks, old chap," he cried briskly. "That will do nicely. Switch off the current, will you?" He skipped off the gun rest and looked gravely at his watcher, gathering about his legs the loose folds of his gown. The plump, shadowed face and sullen oval jowl recalled a prelate, patron of arts in the Middle Ages. A pleasant smile broke quietly over his lips. "The mockery of it," he said gaily. "Your absurd name, an ancient Greek." He pointed his finger in friendly jest and went over to the parapet, laughing to himself. Stephen Dedalus stepped up, followed him warily halfway and sat down on the edge of the gun rest, watching him still as he propped his mirror on the parapet, dipped the brush in the bowl and lathered cheeks and neck. Buck Milligan's gay voice went on. "My name is absurd too. Malachi Milligan, two dactyls. But it has a Hellenic ring, hasn't it? dripping and sunny like the buck himself. We must go to Athens. Will you come if I can get the aunt to fork out 20 quid? He laid the brush aside and, laughing with delight, cried, Will he come, the jejune Jesuit? Ceasing, he began to shave with care. Tell me, Mulligan, Stephen said quietly. Yes, my love? How long is Haynes going to stay in this tower? Buck Mulligan showed a shaven cheek over his right shoulder. God, isn't he dreadful, he said frankly. A ponderous Saxon. He thinks you're not a gentleman. God, these bloody English. Bursting with money and indigestion. Because he comes from Oxford. You know, Daedalus, you have the real Oxford manner. He can't make you out. Oh, my name for you is the best, Kinch the knife blade. He shaved warily over his chin. He was raving all night about a Black Panther, Stephen said. Where is his gun case? A woeful lunatic, Mulligan said. Were you in a funk? I was, Stephen said, with energy and growing fear. Out here in the dark with a man I don't know, raving and moaning to himself about shooting a Black Panther. You saved men from drowning. I'm not a hero, however. If he stays on here, I'm off. Buck Mulligan frowned at the lather on his razor blade. He hopped down from his perch and began to search his trouser pockets hastily. Scutter, he cried thickly. He came over to the gun rest and, thrusting a hand into Stephen's upper pocket, said, Lend us a loan of your nose rag to wipe my razor. Stephen suffered him to pull out and hold up a show by its corner a dirty, crumpled handkerchief. Buck Mulligan wiped the razor blade neatly. Then, gazing over the handkerchief, he said, The bard's nose rag. A new art colour for our Irish poets. Snot green. You can almost taste it, can't you? He mounted to the parapet again and gazed out over Dublin Bay, his fair oak-pale hair stirring slightly. God, he said quietly, isn't the sea what Elgie calls it? Her great sweet mother, the snot-green sea, the scrotum-tightening sea, epi oinopa ponton. Ah, Daedalus, the Greeks, I must teach you. You must read them in the original. Dalata, Dalata. She is our great sweet mother. Come and look. Stephen stood up and went over to the parapet. Leaning on it, he looked down on the water and on the mailboat clearing the harbour mouth off Kingstown. Our mighty mother, Buck Mulligan said. He turned abruptly, his grey, searching eyes from the sea to Stephen's face. The aunt thinks you killed your mother, he said. That's why she won't let me have anything to do with you. Someone killed her, Stephen said gloomily. You could have knelt down, damn it, Kinch, when your dying mother asked you, Buck Mulligan said. I'm Hyperborean as much as you, but to think of your mother begging you with her last breath to kneel down and pray for her, and you refused. There is something sinister in you. He broke off and lathered again lightly his farther cheek. A tolerant smile curled his lips. But a lovely mummer, he murmured to himself. Kinch, the loveliest mummer of them all. He shaved evenly and with care, in silence, seriously. Stephen, an elbow rested on the jagged granite, leaned his palm against his brow and gazed at the fraying edge of his shiny black coat sleeve. Pain that was not yet the pain of love fretted his heart. Silently in a dream she had come to him after her death, her wasted body within its loose brown grave clothes giving off an odour of wax and rosewood. Her breath that had bent upon him mute, reproachful, a faint odour of wetted ashes. Across the threadbare cuff edge he saw the sea hailed as a great sweet mother by the well-fed voice beside him. The ring of bay and skyline held a dull green mass of liquid. A bowl of white china had stood upon her deathbed, holding the green sluggish bile which she had torn up from her rotting liver by fits of loud, groaning vomiting. Buck Mulligan wiped again his razor blade. "Ah, poor dog's body," he said in a kind voice. "I will give you a shirt and a few nose rags. How are the second-hand breeks?" "They fit well enough," Stephen answered. Buck Mulligan attacked the hollow beneath his underlip. "The mockery of it," he said contentedly. "Second leg they should be. God knows what poxy bowsy left them off. I have a lovely pair with a hair strap, grey. You'll look spiffing in them. I'm not joking, Kinch. You look damn well when you're dressed." "Thanks," Stephen said. "I can't wear them if they're grey." "He can't wear them," Buck Mulligan told his face in the mirror. "Etiquette is etiquette. He kills his mother, but he can't wear grey trousers." He folded his razor neatly and with stroking pulps of fingers felt the smooth skin. Stephen turned his gaze from the sea into the plump face with its smoke-blue immobile eyes. "That fellow I was in with the ship last night," said Buck Mulligan, "says you have GPI. He's up in Dottiesville with Connolly Norman. General paralysis of the insane." He swept the mirror half-circle in the air to flash the tidings abroad in sunlight now radiant on the sea. His curling, shaven lips laughed in the edges of his white, glittering teeth. Laughter seized all in his strong, well-knit trunk. "Look at yourself," he said, "you dreadful bard." Stephen bent forward and peered at the mirror held out to him, cleft by a crooked crack. Hair on end, as he and others see me. Who chose this face for me, this dog's body to rid of vermin? It asks me, too. "I pinched it out of the skivvy's room," Buck Mulligan said. "It does her all right. The aunt always keeps plain-looking servants for Malachi, lead him not into temptation, and her name is Ursula." Laughing again, he brought the mirror away from Stephen's peering eyes. The rage of Caliban at not seeing his face in a mirror, he said, "If Wilde were only alive to see you." Drawing back and pointing, Stephen said with bitterness, "It is a symbol of Irish art, the cracked looking-glass of a servant." Buck Mulligan suddenly linked his arm in Stephen's and walked with him around the tower, his razor and mirror clacking in the pocket where he had thrust them. "It is not fair to tease you like that, Kinch, is it?" he said kindly. "God knows you have more spirit than any of them." Parried again. "He fears the lancet of my art as I fear that of his, the cold steel pen. Cracked looking glass of a servant. Tell that to the oxy chap downstairs and touch him for a guinea. He's stinking with money and thinks you're not a gentleman. His old fellow made him tin by selling jalap to Zulus or some Lundy's Windle or the other. God, Kench, if you and I could only work together, we might do something for the island. Hellenize it." Cranley's arm. His arm. "And to think of you having to beg from these swine. I'm the only one that knows who you are. Why don't you trust me more? What have you got up your nose against me? Is it Haynes? If he makes any noise here, I'll bring down Seymour, and we'll give him a ragging worse than they gave Clive Kempthorpe." Young shouts of moneyed voices in Clive Kempthorpe's rooms. Pale faces. They hold their ribs with laughter, one clasping another. "Oh, I shall expire. Break the news to her gently, Aubrey. I shall die." With slit ribbons of his shirt whipping the air, he hops and hobbles around the table, with trousers down at heels, chased by aides of Magdalene with the tailor's shears. A scared calf's face gilded with marmalade. "I don't want to be debagged. Don't you play the giddy ox with me." Shouts from the open window startling evening in the quadrangle. A deaf gardener, aproned, masked with Matthew Arnold's face, pushes his mower on the sombre lawn, watching narrowly the dancing motes of grasshalms. To ourselves, new paganism, omphalos. "Let him stay," Stephen said. "There's nothing wrong with him except at night." "Then what is it?" Buck Mulligan asked impatiently. "Cough it up. I'm quite frank with you. What have you against me now?" They halted, looking towards the blunt cape of Brayhead that lay on the water like the snout of a sleeping whale. Stephen freed his arm quietly. "Do you wish me to tell you?" he asked. "Yes, what is it?" Buck Mulligan answered. "I can't remember anything." He looked in Stephen's face as he spoke. A light wind passed his brow, fanning softly his fair uncombed hair, and stirring silver points of anxiety in his eyes. Stephen, depressed by his own voice, said, "Do you remember the first day I went to your house after my mother's death?" Buck Mulligan frowned quickly and said, "What? Where?" "I can't remember anything. I remember only ideas and sensations. Why? What happened in the name of God?" "You were making tea," Stephen said, "and went across the landing to get more hot water. Your mother and some visitor came out of the drawing room. She asked you who was in your room." "Yes," Buck Mulligan said. "What did I say? I forget." "You said," Stephen answered, "Oh, it's only Daedalus, whose mother is beastly dead." A flush which made him seem younger and more engaging rose to Buck Mulligan's cheek. "Did I say that?" he asked. "Well, what harm is that?" He shook his constraint from him nervously. "And what is death?" he asked. "Your mother's or yours or my own? You saw only your mother die. I see them pop off every day in the Mater and Richmond, and cut up into tripes in the dissecting room. It's a beastly thing and nothing else. It simply doesn't matter." "You wouldn't kneel down to pray for your mother on her deathbed when she asked you. Why?" "Because you have the cursed Jesuit strain in you, only it's injected the wrong way. To me, it's all a mockery and beastly. Her cerebral lobes are not functioning. She called the doctor Sir Peter Teasel and picks buttercups off the quilt. Humour her till it's over. You crossed her last wish in death, and yet you sulk with me because I don't whinge like some hired mute from Lalouette's. Absurd. I suppose I did say it. I didn't mean to offend the memory of your mother." He had spoken himself into boldness. Stephen, shielding the gaping wounds which the words had left in his heart, said very coldly, "I am not thinking of the offence to my mother." "Of what then?" Buck Mulligan asked. "Of the offence to me," Stephen answered. Buck Mulligan swung round on his heel. "Oh, an impossible person," he exclaimed. He walked off quickly around the parapet. Stephen stood at his post, gazing over the calm sea toward the headland. Sea and headland now grew dim. Pulses were beating in his eyes, veiling their sight, and he felt the fever of his cheeks. A voice within the tower called loudly, "Are you up there, Mulligan?" "I'm coming," Mulligan answered. He turned toward Stephen and said, "Look at the sea. What does it care about offences? Chuck Loyola, Kinch, and come on down. The Sassenach wants his morning rashes." His head altered again for a moment, at the top of the staircase, level with the roof. "Don't mope over it all day," he said. "I'm inconsequent. Give up the moody brooding." His head vanished, but the drone of his descending voice boomed out of the stairhead. "And no more turn aside and brood upon love's bitter mystery, for Fergus rules the brazen cars." Wood shadows floated silently by through the morning peace from the stairhead seaward where he gazed. Inshore and further out the mirror of water whitened, spurned by light-shod hurrying feet, white breast of the dim sea. The twinning stresses, two by two, a hand plucking the harp strings, merging their twining chords. Wave white wedded words shimmering on the dim tide. A cloud began to cover the sun slowly, wholly, shadowing the bay in deeper green. It lay beneath him, a bowl of bitter waters. Fergus's song. I sang it alone in the house, holding down the long dark chords. Her door was open. She wanted to hear my music. Silent, with awe and pity, I went to her bedside. She was crying in her wretched bed. For those words, Stephen. Love's bitter mystery. Where now? Her secrets, old feather fans, tasseled dance cards, powdered with musk, a gourd of amber beads in a locked drawer, a birdcage hung in the sunny window of her house when she was a girl. She heard old Royce sing in the pantomime of Turco the Terrible and laughed with others when he sang, I am the boy that can enjoy invisibility. Phantasmal mirth, folded away, musk perfumed, and no more turn inside and brood. Folded away in the memory of nature with her toys, memories beset his brooding brain, her glass of water from the kitchen tap when she had approached the sacrament, a cord apple filled with brown sugar roasting for her at the hob on a dark autumn evening, her shapely fingernails redded by the blood of squashed lice from the children's shirts. In a dream, silently, she had come to him, her wasted body within its loose grave clothes giving off an odor of wax and rosewood, her breath bent over him with mute, secret words, a faint odor of wetted ashes. Her glazing eyes staring out of death to shake and bend my soul, on me alone. The ghost candle to light her agony, ghostly light on the tortured face, her hoarse, loud breath rattling in horror, while all prayed on their knees. Her eyes on me to strike me down, Liliata Rutulianum te confessorum toma succumdet. Ebulantium de virginum chorus exhibiat. Ghoul, chewer of corpses. No, mother, let me be and let me live. Kinshahoy. Buck Mulligan's voice sang from within the tower. It came nearer up the staircase, calling again. Stephen, still trembling at his soul's cry, heard warm running sunlight, and in the air behind him friendly words. Daedalus, come down like a good mousie. Breakfast is ready. Haynes is apologizing for waking us last night. It's all right. I'm coming, Stephen said, turning. Do for Jesus' sake, Buck Mulligan said. For my sake and for all our sakes. His head disappeared and reappeared. I told him your symbol of Irish art. He says it's very clever. Touch him for a quid, will you? A guinea, I mean. I get paid this morning, Stephen said. The school kip? Buck Mulligan said. How much? 4 quid? Lend us one. If you want it, Stephen said. 4 shining sovereigns, Buck Mulligan cried with delight. We'll have a glorious drunk to astonish the druidy druids. 4 omnipotent sovereigns. He flung up his hands and tramped down the stone stairs, singing out of tune with a Cockney accent. Oh, we won't have a merry time, drinking whiskey, beer and wine, on Coronation Day. Oh, won't we have a merry time on Coronation Day. Warm sunshine merrying over the sea. The nickel shaving bowl shone, forgotten on the parapet. Why should I bring it down, or leave it there all day, forgotten friendship? He went over to it, held it in his hands a while, feeling its coolness, smelling the clammy slaver of the lather in which the brush was stuck. So I carried the boat of incense then at Clongo's. I am on another now, and yet the same. A servant too, a server of a servant. In the gloomy domed living room of the tower, Buck Mulligan's gowned form moved briskly to and fro about the hearth, hiding and revealing its yellow glow. 2 shafts of soft daylight fell across the flagged floor from the high barbicans, and at the meeting of their rays a cloud of coal smoke and fumes of fried grease floated, turning. We'll be choked, Buck Mulligan said. Haynes, open that door, will you? Stephen laid the shaving bowl on the locker. A tall figure rose from the hammock where it had been sitting, went to the doorway and pulled open the inner doors. Have you the key? A voice asked. Daedalus has it, Buck Mulligan said. Janie Mackham choked. He howled without looking up from the fire. Kinch. It's in the lock, Stephen said, coming forward. The key scraped round harshly twice, and when the heavy door had been set ajar, welcome light and bright air entered. Haynes stood at the doorway looking out. Stephen hailed his upended valise to the table and sat down to wait. Buck Mulligan tossed the fry on the dish beside him. Then he carried the dish and a large teapot over to the table and set them down heavily and sighed with relief. I'm melting, he said, as the candle remarked but hush. Not a word more on that subject. Kinch, wake up. Bread, butter, honey. Haynes, come in. The grub is ready. Bless us, O Lord, and these thy gifts. Where's the sugar? Oh, Jay, there's no milk. Stephen fetched the loaf and the pot of honey and the butter cooler from the locker. Buck Mulligan sat down in a sudden pet. What sort of a kip is this, he said. I told her to come after 8. We can drink it black, Stephen said thirstily. There's a lemon in the locker. Oh, damn you and your Paris fads, Buck Mulligan said. I want Sandy Cove milk. Haynes came in from the doorway and said quietly, The woman is coming up with the milk. The blessings of God on you, Buck Mulligan cried, jumping up from his chair. Sit down, pour out the tea there. The sugar is in the bag. Here, I can't go fumbling at the damn eggs. He hacked through the fry on the dish and slapped it out on 3 plates, saying, In nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti. Haynes sat down to pour out the tea. I'm giving you 2 lumps each, he said. But I say, Mulligan, you do make strong tea, don't you? Buck Mulligan, hewing thick slices from the loaf, said in an old woman's wheedling voice, When I makes tea, as old Mother Grogan said. And when I makes water, I makes water. By Jove, it is tea, Haynes said. Buck Mulligan went on hewing and wheedling. So I do, Mrs. Cahill, said she. Begob, ma'am, says Mrs. Cahill. God send you don't make them in one pot. He lunged towards his messmates and turned a thick slice of bread impaled on his knife. That's folk, he said very earnestly, for your book, Haynes. 5 lines of text and 10 pages of notes about the folk and the fish gods of Dundrum, printed by the Weird Sisters in the year of the big wind. He turned to Stephen and asked in a fine puzzled voice, lifting his brows. Can you recall, brother, is Mother Grogan's tea and water pot spoken of in the Mabinogion, or is it in the Upanishads? I doubt it, said Stephen gravely. Do you now? Buck Mulligan said in the same tone. Your reasons, pray. I fancy, Stephen said as he ate, it did not exist in or out of the Mabinogion. Mother Grogan was, one imagines, a kinswoman of Mary Ann. Buck Mulligan's face smiled with delight. Charming, he said in a finical, sweet voice, showing his white teeth and blinking his eyes pleasantly. Do you think she was? Quite charming. Then, suddenly overclouding all his features, he growled in a hoarsened, rasping voice as he hewed again vigorously at the loaf. For old Mary Ann, she doesn't give a damn, but hissing up her petticoats. He crammed his mouth with fry and munched and droned. The doorway was darkened by an entering form. The milk, sir. Come in, mum, Mulligan said. Can't you get the jug? An old woman came forward and stood by Stephen's elbow. That's a lovely morning, sir, she said. Glory be to God. To whom? Mulligan said, glancing at her. Ah, to be sure. Stephen reached back and took the milk jug from the locker. The islanders, Mulligan said to Haynes casually, speak frequently of the collector of prepuces. How much, sir? Asked the old woman. A quart, Stephen said. He watched her pour into the measure and thence into the jug rich white milk, Not hers, old drunken perhaps. She poured again a measureful in Italy. Old and secret she had entered from a morning world, maybe a messenger. She praised the goodness of the milk, pouring it out, crouching by a patient cow at daybreak in the lush field, a witch on her toadstool, her wrinkled fingers quick at the squirting dugs. The load about her whom they knew, dew-silky cattle, silk of the kine and poor old woman, names given her in old times. A wandering crone, lowly form of an immortal, serving her conqueror and her gay betrayer. Their common cuckscreen, a messenger from the secret morning, to serve or to upbraid, whether he could not tell, but scorned to beg her favour. It is indeed, ma'am, Buck Mulligan said, pouring milk into their cups. Taste it, sir, she said. He drank at her bidding. If we could live on good food like that, he said to her somewhat loudly, we couldn't have the country full of rotten teeth and rotten guts. Living in a bog swamp, eating cheap food and the streets paved with dust, horse dung and consumptive spits. Are you a medical student, sir? The old woman asked. I am, ma'am, Buck Mulligan answered. Look at that now, she said. Stephen listened in scornful silence. She bows her old head to a voice that speaks to her loudly. Her bone setter, her medicine man, me she slights. To the voice that will shrive in oil for the grave all there is of her but her woman's unclean loins, of man's flesh made not in God's likeness, the serpent's prey. And to the loud voice that now bids her be silent with wandering unsteady eyes. Do you understand what he says? Stephen asked her. Is it French you're talking, sir? The old woman said to Haynes. Haynes spoke to her again in longer speech, confidently. Irish, Buck Mulligan said. Is the Gaelic on you? I thought it was Irish, she said, by the sound of it. Are you from the West, sir? I'm an Englishman, Haynes answered. He's English, Buck Mulligan said, and he thinks we ought to speak Irish in Ireland. Sure we ought to, the old woman said, and I'm ashamed I don't speak the language myself. I'm told it's a grand language by them that knows. Grand is no name for it, said Buck Mulligan. Wonderful entirely. Fill us out some more tea, Kinch. Would you like a cup, ma'am? No, thank you, sir, the old woman said, slipping the ring of the milk can on her forearm and about to go. Haynes said to her, Have you your bill? We'd better pay her, Mulligan, hadn't we? Stephen filled again the 3 cups. Bills, sir, she said, halting. Well, it's 7 mornings a pint at 2 pence is 7 shoes as a shilling and 2 pence over, and these 3 mornings a quart at 4 pence is 3 quarts as a shilling. That's a shilling and 1 and 2 is 2 and 2, so. Buck Mulligan sighed, and having filled his mouth with the crust thickly buttered on both sides, stretched forth his legs and began to search his trouser pockets. Pay up and look pleasant, Haynes said to him, smiling. Stephen filled a 3rd cup, a spoonful of tea flavouring faintly the thick, rich milk. Buck Mulligan brought up a florin, twisted it around in his fingers, and cried, A miracle! He passed it along the table towards the old woman, saying, Ask nothing more of me, sweet. All I can give you, I give. Stephen laid the coin in her uneager hand. We'll owe 2 pence, he said. Time enough, sir, she said, taking the coin. Time enough. Good morning, sir. She curtsied and went out, followed by Buck Mulligan's tender chant. Heart of my heart, were it more, would be laid at your feet. He turned to Stephen and said, Seriously, Dedalus, I'm stony. Hurry out to your school kip and bring us back some money. Today the bards must drink and junket. Ireland expects that every man this day will do his duty. That reminds me, Haynes said, arising, that I have to go visit your National Library today. I'll swim first, Buck Mulligan said. He turned to Stephen and asked blandly, Is this the day for your monthly wash, Kinch? Then he said to Haynes, The unclean bard makes a point of washing once a month. All Ireland is washed by the Gulf Stream, Stephen said, as he let honey trickle over a slice of the loaf. Haynes from the corner where he was knotting easily a scarf about the loose collar of his tennis shirt spoke. I intend to make a collection of your sayings if you will let me. Speaking to me, they wash and tub and scrub, egg and bite of inwit, conscience, yes, here's the spot. That one about the cracked-looking glass of a servant being the symbol of Irish art is deuced good. Buck Mulligan kicked Stephen's foot under the table and said with warmth of tone, Wait till you hear him on Hamlet, Haynes. Well, I mean it, Haynes said, still speaking to Stephen. I was just thinking of it when that poor old creature came in. Would I make any money by it? Stephen asked. Haynes laughed, and as he took his soft grey hat from the holdfast of the hammock, he said, I don't know, I'm sure. He strolled out to the doorway. Buck Mulligan bent across to Stephen and said with coarse vigour, You put your hoof in it now? What did you say that for? Well, Stephen said, the problem is to get money. From whom? From the milkwoman or from him? It's a toss-up, I think. I'll blow him out about you, Buck Mulligan said, and then you come along with your lousy leer and your gloomy Jesuit jibes. I see little hope, Stephen said, from her or from him. Buck Mulligan sighed tragically and laid his hand on Stephen's arms. From me, Kinch, he said. In a suddenly changed tone, he added, To tell you the God's truth, I think you're right. Damn all else they're good for. Why don't you play them as I do? To hell with them all. Let us get out of the kip. He stood up, gravely ungirdled, and disrobed himself of his gown, saying resignedly, Mulligan is stripped of his garments. He emptied his pockets onto the table. There's your snot rag, he said. And putting on a stiff collar and rebellious tie, spoke to them, chiding them, and to his dangling watch chain. His hands plunged and rummaged in his trunk while he called for a clean handkerchief. God will simply have to dress the character. I want puce gloves and green boots. Contradiction? Do I contradict myself? Very well then. I contradict myself. Mercurial Malachi. A limp black missile flew out of his talking hands. And there's your Latin Quarter hat, he said. Stephen picked it up and put it on. Haynes called to them from the doorway. Are you coming, you fellows? I'm ready, Buck Mulligan answered, going towards the door. Come out, Kinch. You have eaten all we left, I suppose. Resigned, he passed out with grave words and gait, saying well now with sorrow. And going forth he met Butterly. Stephen, taking his ash plant from its leaning place, followed them out and, as they went down the ladder, pulled to the slow iron door and locked it. He put the huge key in his inner pocket. At the foot of the ladder, Buck Mulligan asked, Did you bring the key? I have it, Stephen said, preceding them. He walked on. Behind him, he heard Buck Mulligan club with his heavy bath towel the leader shoots of ferns or grasses. Down, sir. How dare you, sir? Haynes asked. Do you pay rent for this tower? 12 quid, Buck Mulligan said. To the Secretary of State for War, Stephen added over his shoulder. They halted while Haynes surveyed the tower and said at last, Rather bleak in winter time, I should say. Martello, you call it. Bailey Pitts had them built, Buck Mulligan said, when the French were on the sea, but ours is the Omphalos. What is your idea of Hamlet? Haynes asked Stephen. No, no, Buck Mulligan shouted in pain. I'm not equal to Thomas Aquinas and the 55 reasons he has made out to prop it up. Wait till I have a few pints in me first. He turned to Stephen, saying as he pulled down neatly the peaks of his primrose waistcoat, "You wouldn't manage it under 3 pints, Kinch, could you?" "It has waited so long," Stephen said listlessly. "It can wait longer." "You pique my curiosity," Haynes said amiably. "Is it some paradox?" "Pooh," Buck Mulligan said. "We've grown out of wild and paradoxes. It's quite simple. He proves by algebra that Hamlet's grandson is Shakespeare's grandfather, and that he himself is the ghost of his own father." "What?" Haynes said, beginning to point at Stephen. "He himself?" Buck Mulligan slung his towel stall-wise around his neck, and bending in loose laughter, said to Stephen's ear, "O shade of Kinch the elder, Japhett in search of a father." "We're always tired in the morning," Stephen said to Haynes, "and it is rather long to tell." Buck Mulligan, walking forward again, raised his hands. "The sacred pint alone can unbind the tongue of Daedalus," he said. "I mean to say," Haynes explained to Stephen as they followed, "this tower and these cliffs here remind me somehow of Elsinore. That Beetle's Oar is based into the sea, isn't it?" Buck Mulligan turned suddenly for an instant towards Stephen, but did not speak. In the bright, silent instant, Stephen saw his own image in cheap, dusty mourning between their gay attires. "It's a wonderful tale," Haynes said, bringing them to halt again. Eyes pale as the sea, the wind had freshened, paler, firm, and prudent. The sea's ruler, he gazed southward over the bay, empty save for the smoke plume of the mailboat vague on the bright skyline, and a sail tacking by the Muglins. "I read a theological interpretation of it somewhere," he said, bemused. "The father and the son idea. The son striving to be atoned with the father." Buck Mulligan at once put on a blithely, broadly smiling face. He looked at them, his well-shaped mouth open happily, his eyes, from which he had suddenly withdrawn all shrewd sense, blinking with mad gaiety. He moved a doll's head to and fro, the brims of his Panama hat quivering, and began to chant in a quiet, happy, foolish voice. "I'm the queerest young fellow that you ever heard. My mother's a Jew, her father's a bird. With Joseph the joiner I cannot agree, so here's to the disciples and Calvary." He held up a forefinger of warning. "If anyone thinks that I am divine, he'll get no free drinks when I'm making the wine. But have to drink water and wish it were plain that I make it when the wine becomes water again." He tugged swiftly at Stephen's ash plant in farewell, and running forward to brow of the cliff, fluttered his hands at his sides like fins or wings of one about to rise in the air, and chanted, "Goodbye now, goodbye, write down all I said, and tell Tom, Dick, and Harry I rose from the dead. What's bred in the bone cannot fail me to fly, and Olivet's breezy, goodbye now, goodbye." He capered before them, down towards the 40-foot hole, fluttering his wing-like hands, leaping nimbly. Mercury's hat quivering in the fresh wind that bore back to them his brief, bird-sweet cries. Haynes, who had been laughing guardedly, walked on beside Stephen and said, "We oughtn't to laugh, I suppose. He's rather blasphemous. I'm not a believer myself, that is to say. Still, his gaiety takes the harm out of it somehow, doesn't it? What did he call it? Joseph the joiner?" "The Ballad of Joking Jesus," Stephen answered. "Oh," Haynes said, "you have heard it before?" "3 times a day after meals," Stephen said dryly. "You're not a believer, are you?" Haynes asked. "I mean, a believer in the narrow sense of the word. Creation from nothing and miracles and a personal God." "There's only one sense of the word, it seems to me," Stephen said. Haynes stopped to take out a smooth silver case in which twinkled a green stone. He sprang it open with his thumb and offered it. "Thank you," Stephen said, taking a cigarette. Haynes helped himself and snapped the case too. He put it back in his side pocket and took from his waistcoat pocket a nickel tinderbox, sprang it open too, and having lit his cigarette, held the flaming spunk towards Stephen in the shell of his hands. Yes, of course, he said as they went on again. Either you believe or you don't, isn't it? Personally, I couldn't stomach the idea of a personal God. You don't stand for that, I suppose. You behold in me, Stephen said, with grim displeasure, a horrible example of free thought. And I think that's where I'm going to leave it tonight. If you want to pick up where we've left off and carry on reading Ulysses for yourself, you can find it linked to Project Gutenberg in the show notes. Thanks again for joining me on this episode of Sleepy Time Tales, the podcast designed around a bedtime story to help you to get a restful night. New episodes will be released every Sunday night to give you something fresh to help you rest in a new week. But make sure to subscribe in whatever service you use so that you get your new episodes whenever they come out. A reminder that the music for tonight is Sweet Night and Trends by Kumiko. Check out more of their work on their website, which you'll find linked in the show notes. Good night, and sweet dreams.